The rain that night felt heavier than anything I'd ever known. It wasn't just water falling from the sky. It was everything I'd been holding back for years. My tears, my fears, my exhaustion. Each drop stung as it hit my face, soaking through my thin coat until even my bones felt cold. Through the curtain of rain, I could see the mansion glowing on the hill, my parents' house. Golden lights wrapped around every tree, music spilling from the open windows, laughter echoing into the night. The world inside those walls was celebrating, while mine was collapsing. I remember clutching the hospital envelope in my hand, my daughter's test results, damp and wrinkled. The words "urgent treatment required" were smudged but still burned into my mind. The doctors had said she needed immediate surgery, something I couldn't afford no matter how many extra shifts I worked. And so I came here, to the people who had once called me their daughter. I walked up the long driveway, shoes sinking into mud, lights from the chandeliers reflecting on the puddles. Each step felt like a question I didn't want to ask. Would they open the door for me? Would they even remember I existed? When I reached the entrance, I hesitated. My reflection in the glass doors looked nothing like the girl who'd grown up here. Just a mother worn down by life, drenched and desperate. I knocked once. No one heard. The music was too loud. I knocked again, harder. This time, a servant opened the door, startled by my soaked appearance. "Ma'am, the party," he began, but I cut him off. "Please, I need to see them." "It's an emergency." He hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly. Inside, warmth hit me like a cruel reminder. The smell of roses, champagne, and money filled the air. Guests in designer dresses smiled and posed for pictures beneath a golden arch that read, "Congratulations, Ryan and Emily." My brother's engagement. The $350,000 celebration I'd seen splashed across social media. And there they were, my parents laughing, radiant in their luxury. My mother's diamond necklace sparkled brighter than the chandelier above her. My father stood proudly beside Ryan, beaming like a man who had it all. For a moment, I froze. I didn't want to ruin this night, but my daughter's life depended on it. "Mom, Dad," I called out, my voice trembling. They turned. At first, confusion, then shock, then disappointment. My mother's smile vanished. "What are you doing here, Lily?" she said softly but coldly. Everyone was watching now, the music fading into whispers. I felt every eye on me, judging, pitying. I didn't know where else to go," I stammered. "It's my daughter. She's sick. The doctor said she needs surgery immediately. I just need some help, please, just enough to get her treated." My father's expression hardened. "Lily, this is not the time. We're in the middle of something important." "Important?" I repeated, disbelief cracking my voice. "Dad, she's dying!" The crowd fell silent. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw something flicker in my mother's eyes. Guilt, maybe. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "We've already helped you before," she said sharply. "You made your choices when you left. We can't keep cleaning up your messes." Her words cut deeper than the rain ever could. "Cleaning up my mess?" I whispered. "She's your granddaughter." My mother's face softened just for a moment, then she looked away. "This is Ryan's night. Don't do this here." Ryan stepped forward, his hand resting on my father's shoulder. "Maybe she should go," he said quietly. "It's embarrassing." That was it. No heart, no family, no love. Just shame and status. I stood there, drenched, shaking, my heart tearing itself apart. I wanted to scream, to beg. But what was the point? They'd already chosen. A celebration over compassion. A party over a life. My father turned to the guard at the door. "Please escort her out." I didn't resist. I just looked at them one last time. The people who had given me life but refused to save the one that mattered most. As the door closed behind me, the sound of laughter returned inside. The rain hit harder now, soaking through my tears. And for the first time in my life, I realized I no longer had a family. I walked away from that mansion under the storm, whispering to myself the promise that would change everything. Someday, they'll remember this night. And when they do, I'll be the one with the power to choose. The sound of the rain still echoed in my head long after I'd left that mansion. Even when I sat back inside the cold hospital corridor, it was like the storm had followed me. Not outside, but inside me. It lived in my chest, heavy and endless. I sat there, my clothes still damp, clutching my daughter's tiny hand. The machines beside her bed hummed softly, their blinking lights marking every fragile second. She looked so peaceful, so unaware of the chaos outside those hospital walls. Her eyelashes trembled slightly as she breathed. Weak, but still fighting. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, whispering, "Mommy's here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." But deep down, I didn't know how much longer I could hold everything together. The doctor's words replayed in my mind like a cruel echo. She needs surgery soon. Every day we delay increases the risk. He'd said it gently, but his eyes carried the truth. Time was slipping away. I'd already maxed out my credit cards, sold everything worth selling, even pawned my wedding ring. The bills kept piling up like waves determined to drown me. Every morning brought another reminder. Red-stamped letters, voicemails from the billing office, polite voices masking indifference. But none of that hurt as much as the silence. The silence from my parents. The silence from the people who were supposed to care. I'd grown up believing family meant unconditional love, that no matter what, they'd stand beside you. But that night had shown me something else. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's just a word people hide behind when it's convenient. There were nights I sat by her bed and stared out the window, watching the city lights blur through my tears. Somewhere out there, people were laughing, celebrating, falling in love, while I prayed for my little girl to live through another night. I barely slept. Every sound from the monitors jolted me awake. Every doctor's step down the hall made my heart stop. And yet, through all of it, she'd smile at me. Weak, but brave. That tiny smile was the only light left in my world. I remember one evening, a nurse placed a blanket over my shoulders and said softly, "You should rest." I wanted to tell her I couldn't. How could I rest when the person who gave me life refused to save hers? That question haunted me. What kind of love measures worth in dollars? What kind of heart turns away from its own blood? Sometimes I thought about calling them again. Maybe if I begged harder, they'd change their minds. But then I remembered the look on my mother's face, the cold distance in her eyes, and I knew the answer. So instead I sat there, night after night, whispering stories to my daughter, pretending the world outside didn't exist. Pretending we weren't invisible. The world moved on without us, cars rushing past, people posting pictures, living lives untouched by pain. But inside that small hospital room, time stood still. It was just me, my daughter, and the sound of machines keeping her alive. And in that silence, I made myself another promise. One even stronger than the first. If no one will save us, then I'll save us both. That night, for the first time in weeks, I stopped crying. Because somewhere beneath all that pain, I felt something else beginning to stir. Not hope, not yet, but strength. A quiet, burning strength that whispered, "They'll regret ever turning you away." There's a moment in every storm when you stop hoping the rain will end and just start learning how to stand in it. Weeks had passed since that night. My daughter's condition was stable for now, but the hospital kept reminding me that stability wasn't enough. The surgery bill hung over me like a noose, a number I could never reach no matter how many extra hours I worked. Until one morning, my manager called me into his office. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "Lily, the company's downsizing. You've been a loyal worker, but..." I didn't hear the rest. My mind just went blank. Downsizing. That was their polite way of saying I was disposable. I walked out of that building with a cardboard box and a head full of noise. The city was loud, but inside me, everything was quiet. Numb. I went from hospital to job interviews, from friends to old classmates. Anyone who might lend me something, anything. Most didn't answer my calls. Some did, only to say, "I'm sorry, Lily. Things are tough for everyone right now." One even said, "You know, maybe you shouldn't have left your parents' side. They could have helped. If only she knew." Days turned into weeks. The hospital started asking for payment again. Rent was overdue. Then came the night my landlord knocked. He didn't shout, didn't threaten, just sighed. "I've been patient, Lily, but I can't let you stay for free. I'm sorry." Sorry. Everyone was always sorry. That night, I packed what little we had. A few clothes, some toys, and my daughter's favorite blanket. We moved into a small shelter nearby, a place that smelled of wet walls and tired dreams. I sat on that narrow bed, holding her close as she slept, her tiny hand clutching my shirt like she was afraid I'd disappear too. In that dim light, surrounded by silence and strangers, something inside me cracked. Not the kind of crack that breaks you, the kind that lets something new in. I went to the small bathroom across the hall, looked into the cracked mirror, and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back wasn't weak. She wasn't the desperate girl who begged for help under the rain. She was someone who had been through hell and was still standing. My reflection was tired, yes, but behind those eyes there was something sharper now. A decision. I whispered to that reflection, my voice low and steady. No more begging. The words felt strange at first, like they didn't belong to me. But the more I said them, the stronger they sounded. No more tears. No more knocking on closed doors. I touched the mirror, tracing my reflection's outline with trembling fingers. I don't need them anymore, I said softly. One day, they'll come to me. It wasn't anger that filled me then. It was purpose. A quiet, burning purpose that turned the weight of my pain into fuel. That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't pray for someone to rescue me. I prayed for strength, to build, to rise, to never let my daughter suffer again. Outside, the rain began to fall again, but this time it didn't sound like sadness. It sounded like cleansing, like the beginning of something new. And as the first light of morning touched the shelter walls, I whispered to myself, this isn't the end. This is where everything begins. They say after the storm, the world smells different, like the earth is trying to start over. That's exactly how my life began to feel. After months of surviving in that shelter, something in me refused to die. The fear, the shame, the exhaustion, they were still there, but buried under something stronger. A spark. It wasn't big or bright yet, but it was mine. I started small. One morning, I walked into a local cafe with a trembling voice and asked if they needed help. The owner, a kind woman named Maria, looked at me for a moment and said, "Can you handle long hours?" I smiled weakly. "I can handle anything." She nodded. "Then be here at 6 tomorrow." It wasn't much, minimum wage, long shifts, tired feet, but it was honest work. Every cup of coffee I poured felt like a step forward. Every tip, no matter how small, was a piece of hope. When I wasn't working, I spent time at the library. The shelter offered free access to an old computer lab, and there I sat night after night, learning. Basic business courses, online tutorials about fundraising, healthcare nonprofits, anything that connected to what nearly destroyed me. I didn't have money, but I had something better: purpose. Each new skill I learned made me feel less helpless. Each lesson reminded me that I was capable of more than just survival. And through it all, through the sleepless nights and long shifts, my daughter was healing. Slowly, beautifully, like a flower learning to bloom again after the storm. Her cheeks began to glow again, her laughter returned, and every time she said, "Mommy," it felt like the world was forgiving me a little more. Her recovery became my heartbeat. I'd wake up before dawn, look at her sleeping peacefully, and whisper, "I'm doing this for you." Because she deserved more than struggle. She deserved a future. Months passed. I started saving little by little. Coins at first, then bills. Maria noticed how hard I worked and offered me extra shifts. "Your eyes have fight in them," she once said. "Don't ever lose that." One afternoon, while serving coffee to a group of doctors from a nearby hospital, I overheard them talking about a new healthcare outreach program, one that offered free training for people interested in medical support work. My heart raced. That was it, the doorway I'd been waiting for. That night, I filled out the application with shaking hands. I didn't have the qualifications, but I had a story that burned brighter than any degree. When they called me for an interview, I told them everything about my daughter, the hospital, the nights I spent praying in silence. They didn't pity me. They respected me. And a week later, I got the call. I was accepted. That moment changed everything. Training was tough. Long hours, endless lessons, and constant reminders of the pain I'd once lived through. But every time I helped a sick child smile or comforted a worried parent, I felt something heal inside me too. One day, my instructor said something that stayed with me. Some of the best healers are those who've been broken the most. I carried that sentence like a prayer. My daughter and I eventually moved out of the shelter and into a small apartment, just one room, but it was ours. The first night there, she pointed at the window and said, "Mommy, look, no more rain." I smiled. "Not tonight, sweetheart." And for the first time in forever, I believed her. Hope didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, through every kind gesture, every hard-earned victory, every morning that didn't hurt as much as the last. I still remembered that night at the mansion, the laughter, the rejection. But it didn't break me anymore. It fueled me. Because now I was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone unstoppable. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. They say healing isn't a straight line. It's a climb, slow, painful, and lonely. But every scar I carried became a step upward. Months turned into years. The woman who once begged in the rain was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, quieter, yes, but unbreakable. My mornings began before sunrise. I worked at the clinic, studied during lunch breaks, and spent nights building something that no one believed I could. A life worth living. The outreach training turned into a full-time position. I started managing small health drives, then entire community projects. The first time someone called me director, I almost laughed. Not because I doubted myself, but because I could still hear my parents' voices echoing from that night. "We can't ruin the engagement for this nonsense." Those words never left me. They became my fuel. Every rejection letter I turned into a lesson. Every tear I cried became a reason to fight harder. I enrolled in online courses, studied finance and healthcare management, learned how to write grants, and built partnerships with local organizations. I worked until my hands shook, until my eyes burned, because I never wanted to be powerless again. And slowly, something extraordinary happened. People started noticing me. Hospitals invited me to speak about resilience and recovery programs. Investors offered to fund my initiatives. I founded my own small organization dedicated to helping families afford treatment for children. The same kind of help I was once denied. Each success felt like a quiet victory whispered to the universe. I did it. Without you. But even as I rose, I never forgot. Sometimes, while driving home late at night, I'd see flashes of that mansion, the gold lights, the laughter, the rain-soaked driveway. The memories didn't hurt anymore. They pushed me. There were days I'd stand in front of a mirror before a presentation, dressed in confidence and calm, and whisper, "They thought I'd break." And somewhere deep inside, a voice would answer, "Not this time." I never bragged, never told anyone about my past. Most people knew me as the founder of a fast-growing charity, polished, compassionate, and calm. They didn't see the storms behind my smile. My daughter, now healthy and full of life, became my world. Watching her walk into school each morning reminded me that love, not money, not blood, is what builds a real family. At night, when she'd fall asleep beside me, I'd sometimes whisper, "One day, sweetheart, they'll come to us." And I knew it wasn't a wish anymore. It was a promise. Because I was no longer the woman they left out in the rain. I was the storm they never saw coming. It started with a newspaper article. A journalist had attended one of our children's health fundraisers. A small event, really. Nothing grand. But the next morning, my name was printed in bold letters. "Local woman turns pain into purpose, helping hundreds of sick children." I remember staring at it in disbelief, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. For years, I had lived in the shadows, working quietly, keeping my past buried deep. But suddenly, the world noticed. Then came the invitations. TV interviews, charity galas, podcasts. Everyone wanted to know my story of resilience. They called me an inspiration, a symbol of hope. If only they knew what that hope had cost me. I smiled for the cameras, spoke with grace, and thanked my team. But behind every polite smile was a silent truth. I wasn't doing this for applause. I was doing it because no child should ever face what mine did, and no mother should ever have to beg the people who were supposed to love her most. Soon, my organization expanded beyond the city. We partnered with major hospitals, launched nationwide campaigns, and I began traveling to speak about healthcare access for children. My face appeared on magazine covers, in conference panels, and eventually on TV screens in homes I once wasn't welcome in. I didn't see it happen, but I can imagine the moment my parents heard my name again after all those years. Maybe they were sipping champagne in their polished dining room when my face flashed on the news. Maybe my mother's hand trembled just a little, or my father's voice faltered when he read the headline, "Founder of Hope Spring Foundation, Empowering Families in Need." I wonder what they felt. Pride? Guilt? Regret? Did they remember that night when I stood outside their mansion, drenched in rain, begging for mercy? Or did they simply pretend it never happened like they always did? But destiny has a strange sense of humor. Because while they built their empire on luxury and appearances, I was quietly building mine on compassion and truth. And now, our worlds were circling closer again, like two stars destined to collide. I didn't chase revenge. I didn't need to. Life had already begun writing that chapter for me. And deep down I knew this wasn't over. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. The sky was calm, the kind of morning that feels too peaceful to be real. I was preparing for a meeting when my assistant knocked on my office door. "There's someone here to see you," she said softly. Her tone was careful, almost uneasy. "They say it's urgent." I looked up from my desk. Two names flashed in my mind before she even said them. And when she did, my heart didn't race. It didn't ache. It just went still. Mr. and Mrs. Haverly, my parents. For a moment I said nothing. Just silence. After all these years, after all the nights I cried alone, after every plea they ignored, they were here. But not out of love. Out of need. When they walked into my office, they looked smaller. Not physically, but in spirit. My father's sharp suit couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. My mother's diamond earrings didn't distract from the tremor in her hands. I stood slowly. "Please have a seat." My voice was calm, steady, the kind of control that only comes after surviving a storm. They sat across from me, shifting uncomfortably in the silence. My father spoke first. "There's been an unfortunate situation," he began. "Our business, it's under investigation. We've lost investors, partners. And your brother, well, he's facing some medical complications." He hesitated, eyes flickering to my mother. She couldn't even look at me. "And you're here," I said quietly, "because you need help." My mother's eyes glistened. "We didn't know who else to turn to. The hospital said your foundation. It's one of the few that could approve funding for the kind of treatment he needs." The irony almost made me laugh. The same foundation I built from the ashes they left me in. For years I had imagined this moment, not out of vengeance, but out of wonder. Would I cry? Would I scream? Would I make them feel the pain they gave me? But when it came, I felt nothing but clarity. I leaned back in my chair, meeting their eyes. "Do you remember," I asked softly, "the night it rained? When I came to your door and begged you to save your granddaughter's life?" My father's face hardened. "That was different." "No," I interrupted gently. "That was the moment I learned what family really means." The silence stretched. Only the sound of the clock filled the room. Each tick, a reminder of how time always catches up. I rose from my chair, walked to the window, and looked out at the skyline. The city below sparkled, alive, loud, unstoppable. The world had turned. And this time I wasn't the one begging. "I built this foundation to help those who had nowhere to turn," I said finally. "To give hope where it was once denied. So yes, I'll see what I can do." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. I turned back to them. But not for you. For him, the patient. Because I made a promise years ago and I intend to keep it. They nodded, silent, ashamed. And for the first time, I saw the truth. I didn't need revenge. I had already won. As they left, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass. Calm, steady, unshaken. The woman who once stood in the rain was gone. In her place stood the storm they never saw coming. For days after their visit, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry. That emotion had burned out long ago. But because I finally understood something terrifying. Closure doesn't come when they say sorry. It comes when you realize you no longer need it. Still, their words echoed in my mind. The desperation in my father's voice. The tremor in my mother's hands. The same people who once turned me away had come back, not out of love, but out of necessity. I knew they'd return again, and they did. A few evenings later, they came back to my office, quieter this time. No pride, no superiority. Just silence and regret. My mother spoke first, her voice soft and cracked. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We thought we were protecting what we built. We thought money, reputation, all of it meant security." She paused, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in years. "But we lost our daughter in the process." Her words hung in the air like smoke, thick, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. I looked at them both and said calmly, "You didn't lose me. You gave me away the night you closed that door." My father swallowed hard, his voice rough. "We regret it every day. Please, if there's any way," I raised my hand gently. "This isn't about your business or your son or even your regret. This is about what your choices cost me." I stood and walked around the desk, standing directly in front of them. "When I begged you to help, my daughter was dying. I sold everything I owned. I slept in hospital chairs. I worked 3 jobs. And you had everything. You could have saved her without blinking." Their eyes filled with tears, but I didn't stop. "I used to hate you for it. But now I'm grateful. Because losing everything you refused to give taught me how to build something you never could. Empathy." Silence, heavy, aching silence. My mother broke down quietly, tears tracing lines through the makeup she'd used to hide her guilt. My father's shoulders trembled. The man who once ruled rooms couldn't even meet my eyes. For a long moment, I just watched them. Not out of spite, but understanding. They were finally living the lesson they'd once forced on me. What it feels like to beg and be ignored. I took a deep breath and said softly, "I'll authorize your son's treatment through my foundation. Not because you're my parents, but because I couldn't live with myself if I became what you once were." My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father closed his eyes, relief mixed with disbelief. "But after that," I added quietly, "there's nothing left between us. No more pretending, no more apologies. We all live with the choices we made." I walked to the door and opened it for them. As they stood to leave, my father turned to me and whispered, "You're stronger than we ever deserved." I didn't answer. I just nodded once. Not in anger, not in forgiveness, but in peace. As the door closed behind them, I felt the weight lift from my chest. Years of pain, of loneliness, of rage, dissolving into something purer. Not forgiveness. Freedom. I walked to the window, the city lights reflecting against the glass, and whispered to myself, this was the real revenge. They say revenge is sweet, but I've learned that real revenge is silent. It doesn't scream. It doesn't destroy. It just watches the world correct itself. One choice, one moment at a time. The weeks that followed were strangely calm. My parents' son, my brother, began his treatment through my foundation. I made sure the hospital bills were cleared, the doctors briefed, and the best specialists assigned. But I never visited. I didn't need to see their faces to know what they were feeling. Regret has its own gravity. It pulls you down slowly, until you have no choice but to face the truth you've spent years hiding from. The media caught wind of the story eventually. Whispers started, how the once wealthy Haverleys were now dependent on the charity run by the daughter they abandoned. Some called it karma. Others called it fate. I called it balance. One evening, I got a call from the hospital. My father wanted to see me. I almost didn't go, but something in my heart whispered, "End it your way." When I entered his room, he looked frail, smaller than I remembered. His eyes found mine with a mix of shame and relief. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "You saved him. You saved all of us in ways I can't explain." I stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer beyond the glass. "I didn't do it for you," I said softly. "I did it because I couldn't live knowing I let someone suffer the way you let me." He nodded slowly. "I know. And that's why you've won. You became everything we weren't." His voice trembled, and for the first time in my life, I saw him as a man. Not a father, not a villain. Just a man who finally understood the cost of his choices. I placed the discharge papers on the table and said, "This is the last thing I'll do for you. After this, we go our separate ways. No hatred, no anger, just distance." He closed his eyes and whispered, "You have every right." As I turned to leave, my mother reached for my hand. Her grip was weak, trembling. "We don't deserve your forgiveness," she said through tears. "But we'll live with that." I didn't pull away. I didn't answer. Because some lessons don't need words. Walking out of that hospital felt like walking out of the past itself. No dramatic ending, no fiery confrontation. Just peace. The kind that comes when your pain finally finds purpose. I had a choice that night, to destroy them or to rise above them. And I realized I already had. Redemption wasn't in forgiving them. It was in proving that I didn't need to become like them to win. As I stepped into the cool night air, I looked up at the sky, the same sky that once poured rain over my tears. Now it was clear, still, silent. Maybe that's what justice really looks like. Not thunder, not fire. Just calm after the storm. It's raining again tonight. The same kind of rain that once soaked through my clothes as I stood outside their mansion, begging for mercy. But this time, I'm not broken. I stand by my window, watching droplets race down the glass, each one carrying a memory I no longer run from. The rain doesn't sting anymore. It soothes. Because I've learned that the storm was never meant to drown me. It was meant to cleanse me. I think back to that night, the lights, the laughter, the closed door, how I thought my world had ended. And now, all these years later, I realize that was the night my real life began. Pain can either bury you or build you. And I chose to build. My daughter sleeps soundly in the next room, her laughter now the heartbeat of my home. She doesn't know the full story, not yet. One day I'll tell her how her mother learned the hardest lesson, that sometimes love doesn't come from where you expect, but from what you create within yourself. Family isn't defined by blood or wealth. It's defined by loyalty, by kindness, by the people who stay when everything falls apart. I used to think revenge was about making them suffer the way I did. But standing here now, watching the rain fall gently over the city I helped heal, I know the truth. The best revenge was never destruction. It was transformation, becoming everything they said I never could. I step out onto the balcony, let the rain kiss my skin and close my eyes. It feels different now, not like punishment but peace, the kind that only comes after surviving the storm. And in that moment, I whisper to the night, to the rain, to my past, to every broken version of myself. Thank you for teaching me that strength isn't about who hurt you. It's about who you become after they do. Because sometimes, the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you never could.